Why does life still feel heavy even when you are trying your best to do the right thing? You wake up, you carry your responsibilities, you try to stay patient, you try to stay hopeful, and you remind yourself to be grateful. Yet deep inside, there is a weight that does not seem to leave. Many people feel this way but do not know how to explain it, and today I want to speak directly to that feeling. There is a question that many sincere people carry quietly, and it is a question they often feel guilty for asking. They look at their own lives and say, I am trying to do the right thing, so why does my heart still feel heavy? They are not careless with their actions, they are not reckless with their choices, and they are not intentionally doing wrong. In fact, they are making an effort to improve themselves, to stay patient, and to hold on to hope. Yet when life continues to feel difficult, confusion begins to grow, and that confusion slowly turns into weight on the heart. What makes this even harder is that many people suffer in silence. They do not complain, they do not show frustration openly, and they do not want to appear ungrateful. They keep moving forward while carrying unanswered questions inside them. Over time, this quiet struggle becomes exhausting, because when a person keeps giving effort without seeing change, they begin to wonder whether their efforts truly matter. This is where heaviness settles. Not because faith is weak, but because the heart is tired of waiting for clarity. One of the greatest misunderstandings people have is assuming that a heavy heart means something is wrong with them. They begin to believe that if life feels difficult, it must be because they are failing, being punished, or falling short in some unseen way. This way of thinking quietly damages the soul because it turns every struggle into self-blame. A person starts carrying guilt they were never meant to carry, questioning their worth and doubting their own sincerity, even though they are trying their best. The truth is that heaviness is not always a sign of weakness. In many cases, it is a sign of responsibility. People who care deeply tend to feel deeply, and people who think carefully tend to carry more weight in their hearts. A person who feels heavy is often someone who worries about doing the right thing, about providing for others, about making correct decisions, and about not harming those around them. That kind of awareness does not come without weight. A careless heart may feel light, but a conscious heart often feels burdened. Another reason heaviness is misunderstood is because people expect peace to arrive quickly once effort is made. They assume that once they change their habits, improve their character, or become more consistent in their actions, life should immediately become easier. When this does not happen, disappointment sets in. But growth rarely announces itself with comfort. Patience is built when comfort is delayed, and understanding is shaped when clarity does not come instantly. What feels heavy now may be the very process that is strengthening the heart from within. It is also important to recognize that heaviness does not arrive without purpose. Many times, it forces a person to slow down, to reflect more deeply, and to reassess what truly matters. Without these moments, people rush through life without awareness. A heavy heart often pushes a person to think more carefully, speak more gently, and act more thoughtfully. In this way, heaviness becomes a teacher, not an enemy. It is not meant to break a person, but to refine them. One of the most difficult parts of any struggle is not the struggle itself, but the waiting that comes with it. Waiting tests the heart in a way pain sometimes does not, because pain at least has a feeling attached to it, while waiting often comes with silence. When a person is waiting, they begin to ask questions repeatedly, and those questions slowly exhaust the mind. They ask how long it will take, whether things will change, and whether their patience is even making a difference. Over time, this waiting can feel heavier than the original difficulty. What makes waiting especially hard is that it often comes without explanation. A person may be doing everything they know is right, yet nothing seems to move forward. Days pass, weeks pass, and sometimes even years pass, and the situation appears unchanged. This can cause a person to feel powerless, because effort without visible results challenges the human desire for control. The heart wants assurance, but waiting offers none, and that is why it weighs so heavily. Another reason waiting feels so heavy is because people assume that delay means neglect. When something does not happen quickly, the mind starts creating negative meanings around it. A person may begin to believe that their efforts are unnoticed, that their struggles are unimportant, or that their patience is pointless. These thoughts slowly drain hope, not because the situation is hopeless, but because the heart is tired of not knowing what comes next. It is important to understand that waiting is not empty time. Waiting is a phase in which something unseen is happening. Just because change is not visible does not mean it is absent. Many important developments happen quietly, without announcement, without signs, and without immediate results. The problem is that the human heart struggles with what it cannot see, and so it assumes nothing is happening at all. Waiting also exposes the true state of the heart. It reveals whether a person relies more on outcomes or on purpose, more on results or on effort. When waiting becomes long, it strips away distractions and forces a person to face their thoughts honestly. This can feel uncomfortable, but it is often necessary. A heart that learns how to wait without breaking becomes stronger, calmer, and more grounded than a heart that only knows quick relief. Another aspect of waiting that makes it difficult is isolation. When people suffer silently, they often feel alone, even when surrounded by others. They may feel that no one truly understands what they are going through, and so they keep everything inside. This silence can amplify heaviness, because unspoken struggles tend to grow louder within the heart. Waiting alone feels heavier than waiting with understanding, yet many people choose silence out of fear of being misunderstood. It is also during waiting that comparison becomes most harmful. A person looks around and sees others moving forward while they remain in the same place. They see achievements, progress, and milestones in other people's lives, and they wonder why their own journey feels paused. What they forget is that every life moves at a different pace, and every test has its own timing. Comparing timelines only deepens frustration and makes waiting feel unbearable. Waiting teaches lessons that ease cannot teach. It teaches patience in real terms, not theoretical ones. It teaches humility by reminding a person that not everything is in their control. It teaches reliance by showing that effort alone is not always enough, and that trust must accompany action. These lessons are not easy, and they are rarely welcomed, but they shape a person in ways comfort never could. When waiting becomes long, some people give up internally even if they continue outwardly. They go through the motions of life without hope, without expectation, and without belief that things can improve. This is where heaviness becomes dangerous, because it begins to drain purpose. That is why it is important to recognize waiting for what it is: a phase, not a conclusion. A chapter, not the entire story. Waiting does not mean that life has stopped caring. It means that there is a reason for the pause, even if that reason is not yet clear. Many people only understand the value of their waiting after it ends. They look back and realize that the time they thought was wasted was actually preparing them for what came next. Understanding often arrives later, not during the wait itself. There are times when life feels heavy, not because something is wrong, but because something important is happening within the heart. Many people assume that difficulty is always a sign of failure or loss. But in reality, difficulty often arrives when a person is being shaped for a greater level of understanding. The heart does not mature in comfort alone. It matures when it is challenged, when it is tested, and when it is forced to reflect more deeply on purpose, priorities, and meaning. When life feels heavy, the heart begins to slow down. A person starts thinking more carefully about their actions, their intentions, and their direction. This slowing down can feel uncomfortable because we live in a world that constantly pushes speed, progress, and visible success. When life forces you to pause internally, it can feel like you are falling behind, even when you are not. In reality, this pause is often necessary for growth that cannot happen in constant motion. Many people want answers quickly. They want clarity immediately. They want to understand why things are happening as they are. But clarity does not always come at the beginning of a test. Sometimes clarity arrives only after patience has done its work. If answers came too early, the lesson would lose its depth, the heart would not change, and the person would not grow. That is why heaviness often lasts longer than we expect. It is not meant to hurt us, but to teach us endurance. Another reason life feels heavy is because it exposes attachments. During times of ease, people often rely on routines, plans, and expectations. When difficulty arrives, those things are shaken and the heart realizes how attached it had become to outcomes rather than effort. This realization can feel painful, but it is also freeing. It reminds a person that life is not fully under their control and that surrender is sometimes stronger than resistance. Heaviness also brings honesty. In comfortable times, it is easy to ignore deeper questions. But when life feels heavy, distractions lose their power. A person begins to face their fears, their doubts, and their insecurities more directly. This honesty can feel overwhelming, but it is necessary. A heart that never faces itself remains shallow. A heart that reflects during difficulty gains depth. Many people try to escape heaviness by constantly staying busy. They fill their days with noise, tasks, and responsibilities to avoid sitting with their thoughts. But heaviness cannot always be avoided. It eventually asks to be acknowledged. When it is ignored, it grows stronger. When it is faced with patience and reflection, it begins to soften. This is why stillness, even when uncomfortable, plays an important role in emotional and spiritual growth. It is also important to understand that heaviness does not mean joy will never return. It simply means joy is not the lesson of this moment. Every phase of life teaches something different. Some phases teach gratitude, others teach strength, and some teach reliance. A heavy phase often teaches patience, humility, and trust. These lessons may not feel pleasant, but they are valuable. Sometimes life feels heavy because expectations were too rigid. A person may have imagined life unfolding in a certain way, by a certain time, with certain results. When reality does not match that expectation, disappointment sets in. This disappointment is not a sign of ingratitude, it is a sign of unmet hopes. Learning to adjust expectations without losing hope is one of the hardest lessons a person learns, but it is also one of the most liberating. Another source of heaviness is the pressure people place on themselves. They feel they must always be strong, always composed, and always in control. They believe that struggling means they are failing. This belief adds unnecessary weight. Strength does not mean never feeling heavy. Strength means continuing to move forward even when the heart feels tired. Allowing yourself to acknowledge heaviness without judgment is a form of strength, not weakness. Heaviness can also come from carrying responsibilities that others do not see. Many people quietly support families, care for others, or carry emotional burdens that remain invisible. Because these responsibilities are not always recognized, the person carrying them may feel unappreciated or unseen. Over time, this lack of recognition can add to the feeling of weight. Yet these quiet efforts matter deeply, even when they are not acknowledged. It is also during heavy times that priorities are rearranged. Things that once seemed important lose their importance, and things that were overlooked gain meaning. This shift can feel disorienting, but it is often necessary. A heart that learns what truly matters becomes less attached to what does not. This clarity often emerges slowly through reflection rather than sudden realization. Life feels heavy at times because it is asking for patience that has not yet been developed. Patience is not passive. It is an active choice to continue doing what is right even when outcomes are unclear. Developing this kind of patience takes time, and during that time, the heart may feel strained. But once patience is formed, it brings a calm that cannot be shaken easily. Some people fear heaviness because they think it will never end. But no phase lasts forever. Just as ease changes into difficulty, difficulty eventually changes into ease. The heart, however, often forgets this when it is tired. That is why reminders are important. Heaviness is a season, not a permanent state. It feels long while you are in it, but it will pass. When life feels heavy, it is often because the heart is being prepared to handle something greater. Strength is built before it is needed, not during the moment of ease. A heart that has learned patience, humility, and trust can handle future challenges with more calm and wisdom. This preparation may not be obvious now, but it will make sense later. Understanding heaviness in this way does not remove pain instantly, but it changes how pain is carried. Instead of seeing heaviness as meaningless suffering, it becomes part of a larger process. This shift in perspective lightens the heart, not by removing the weight, but by giving it purpose. When a person has been carrying heaviness for a long time, the greatest challenge is not the weight itself, but learning how to stand without becoming bitter. Many people survive difficult seasons, but they lose softness along the way. Their hearts harden, their patience thins, and their trust weakens. This is why it is important to understand how to remain steady without losing your heart. Because strength without compassion eventually becomes exhaustion. One of the most important things a person must learn during heavy seasons is balance. Balance between effort and rest, between hope and acceptance.